Yeah, I really wanted to open with a joke about putting this story in the freezer. I don't think enough people are going to get it. Though I bet if you did get it, that joke killed. Hey, everybody! So, I'm calling this Oscar Contender review. That's, I guess, a mild misnomer because it implies that I'm going to see all the other major Oscar contenders before they happen. That I'm not doing that, but I did happen to see with Liz Little Women, and I want to talk about it because A, it's still playing in theaters in a fair number of places, and B, it's really, really good. I'm taking the fact that it's an Oscar contender as my excuse for putting this on the main channel, because otherwise this might have shown up in the break room. But it's up for Best Picture, and I would actually say deservedly so. This is a really good movie. As far as my own relationship with Little Women goes, I've never read the book. I know the story. I've seen the 90s version, the one with Winona Ryder. I feel like I've seen bits and pieces of another version at some point, but I know the story basically, more or less. But it's not like something I grew up on. I didn't grow up reading it or anything like that. Liz did. I really wish I could have her on for this review, but it just the timing and scheduling didn't work out, unfortunately. But she did grow up on that book. She read it repeatedly. She grew up on the 90s version, and she loved it as well. And boy, it's hard to sell this if you don't feel inclined to watch a period movie about four sisters. And honestly, I'm usually not inclined to watch that. But dang it, this was good. I mean, first of all, it's worth pointing out the reason Little Women is a classic, and a classic that's still read as opposed to an academic classic, an important book that people talk about but nobody actually reads for fun. People still read Little Women for fun, and it's because it speaks to a truth about growing up and about sisterhood and about relationships and about family dynamics in a way that still holds true now. And the movie captures that really well. And the cast is phenomenal. The ones who have Oscar nominations are Saoirse Ronan as Jo, of course, because it's not even worth asking who anyone's favorite of the sisters in Little Women is, because everyone says Jo. Right? Nobody says something other than Jo. And the other one with the nomination is Florence Pugh, who plays Amy, which is interesting because I do think there's at least a chunk of the fandom of this book who, if you were to ask them their least favorite of the sisters, there's a decent shot a fair number of them would say Amy. So that's kind of interesting. Amy is a character who benefits from how this actually has been reconfigured a bit. Because the book just goes chronologically from when the girls are young all the way through to later in life, and when they're getting to an age where they're getting married, maybe some of them have kids. But the movie actually jumps back and forth between when they're young and later years at a number of intervals. It actually flips back and forth fairly regularly in a way that I actually think is brilliant, because it is taking advantage of the medium of film, because this sort of jumping back and forth wouldn't have flowed as well if the book was like this. Because what cues you into the changes are visual cues. The the scenes set further in the girl's history are lit more warmly. The ones further down the timeline are lit more coldly. There are other visual signifiers, like, say, the length of Joe's hair. And there are things like that that make it so it never has to stop and explain to you, hey, we've moved back in time again. You just get the visual signifiers. And it wouldn't have flowed nearly as well in a book. But by doing that, without altering the plot or the character progression, and actually being pretty dang true to the book in terms of the events, it makes it feel different and very fresh. And of course, for me, that I'm saying that relative to the 90s movie, but again, speaking a little bit for my partner, Liz affirmed the same thing as someone who knows the book really well. It makes it feel, it's a really neat kind of magic trick because it makes it feel fresh and new without actually changing the substance of like any of it. That's a neat trick. And I feel like a lot of this was done to create sort of thematic rhyming of scenes, to be able to complement and show very close together, if not back to back, scenes of events when they are younger, and then some complementary scenes from when they're older that relate in some way, to show how things have stayed the same, how things have changed, and to pair those things off. And I've heard some people concerned that it was confusing, and if someone did find it confusing, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I didn't find it confusing. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was amazing. The way, the temporal trickery of it, and to have it flow as naturally and make, again, for me at least, absolute sense at every step of the way. Man, that's a trick to pull. And Amy is a character who I think benefits a lot from that. Because in the book, if you don't know the story, Amy is kind of awful as a little kid. She is spoiled, she engages in temper tantrums, and she does some really hurtful stuff when she's young. So when you read the book, or when you see any other adaptation that's just going straight chronological, what that means is you see her at her worst early on and for quite a chunk of time, and then you're expected to kind of sympathize with her later, and it's not impossible, but it's tricky. Whereas with this, you actually get to know her better as a kind of pulled together adult. And then you learn about her backstory and go, oh, she was kind of a little demon when she was a kid. Oh, okay. And it fills out the back end as opposed to being how you get to know her in the first place. And as a result, I think she just works really well. I get why Florence Pugh was nominated. And there's also an addition of kind of a speech that she has to the character of Laurie that is not lifted directly from the book. Some of the dialogue is, but this was an insert sort of speech. But again, sort of defaulting to Liz, she was very quick to point out, no, it's still in character. It's not a sort of everything about this character now pulls together and makes sense speech. It does not appear in the book, but it is a gathering of all the elements of the character that are in the book. So even though it's granting her basically sort of a statement of purpose monologue and creating it out of whole cloth, it's just reaffirming what the character always was, as opposed to rewriting it. There's also a very neat meta trick that happens at the end in regards specifically to Joe that is very cheeky. And like it could have been pretentious, but there's this little trick done in regards to Joe and what happens to Joe at the end that feels in character and feels natural and is really cool. And it's just clever. Like, this movie is just really smart. It is smartly constructed, smartly written, smartly directed, smartly acted. It's just really intelligently executed. Greta Gerwig, who wrote and directed this, and criminally is not up for Best Director. The film's up for Best Picture, which it deserves. It's up for Best Adapted Screenplay, which it definitely deserves. She's not up for Director, which is really weird for me, because if you're going to nominate her for the screenplay, like, the screenplay and the directing, especially in this instance, that's truly hand in hand. So, but anyway, what she is able to do and bring to this in terms of finding the hearts of these characters and bringing them to life, flaws and all, because you have characters like Laurie, who, he's a tough character for me to watch sometimes, because he's a bit of a selfish douche at times. And I wish I didn't recognize as much of my own past history in him as I do. But he's really well executed, and everybody's really well cast. Laura Dern as their mother is excellent. Chris Cooper's terrific. Bob Odenkirk is wonderfully affable in the role that he has. It's just really good. I'm not going to go so far as to say everyone should rush out and see it. I get, like, especially for my audience, that probably a minority of you haven't any kind of interest in this subject matter. But if you think there's even an inkling that you might get something out of this, I would honestly seek it out. It's really, really good, and it's touching, and parts of it are heartbreaking. I did cry in this movie. But pretty much for the same reason that Joey wanted to put the book in the freezer. For those of you who caught that reference. But it's just really good. I'm glad I saw it. I wish I'd caught it before the end of the year, because it would have made my top 10. Would have made it high on there too. Like 4 or 5. Knives Out was a little bit better. That probably still would have slipped in at like maybe 3, but like between those two, boy, Knives Out, you want to talk about a movie should have gotten nominations. All right, I'm tangenting. I'm going to wrap it up. Little Women. Did you see it? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Usual stuff to do. If you want to help me out in terms of paying my bills and being able to afford to see my partner and go out to the movies, I have a Patreon. That's greatly appreciated. Even if you're not able to do that, like, subscribe, comment. Those do actually help me out as well. So whatever you want to do with that, with any of it, with none of it, because I'm not going to tell you what to do. End of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.